Hi, I'm Dan Chambers of Chambers Law Firm, and thank you for joining me again for what is now episode 6 of this continuing series on the anatomy of a criminal case. We left off last time talking about the importance of serving a discovery request on the prosecutor to get follow-up discovery to fill in all the gaps in the evidence from your first court date. In this episode, I'm going to digress just for a minute. This doesn't necessarily have to be the, quote, next step in the process, but it is a step that has to be done early in the case. And I call it developing your case theme. What is the theme of the case? And by that I mean, let's put aside all the law, let's put aside the jury instructions, and let's even to some degree put aside what the prosecutor's given us as the evidence. What's the case about? When you say a case theme, you kind of pull back and you take that 30,000 foot view and say, what really happened here? What's the theme? What was driving or motivating the different actors in this case to have this thing occur in the first place? And it's going to vary depending on the case. Let me give you a common example that I encounter in my practice. In a lot of murder cases, you're going to get a defense of self-defense, right? You're going to say, my client had to use deadly force against the victim because the victim was threatening them, had a knife over them, was running at them with a baseball bat, whatever the case might be. And the case theme then becomes, what was the relationship between those two parties? If they knew each other and they had a past, then the theme becomes, my client was in constant fear of that person. They had several run-ins with each other in the past where the alleged victim would beat up my client or take things from him. And that becomes your case theme, is the fact that this person was terrorizing you and finally put you in a position where you had no choice but to use deadly force. And the theme of the case becomes, what was that interaction? And hopefully that victim, let's say, has a violent past. They've committed violent acts against others. There's an evidence code section that allows us to introduce that evidence to show the victim has a propensity for violence. So we have to build the case theme along that line. Or let's say you have a case where it's a case of mistaken identity. Let's say it's a robbery and a person identified you out of what's called a six-pack and they circle your photo and they say it's that person there. The case theme then becomes about, hey, my client was misidentified. That photo that they selected, their identification is suspect, and it's suspect for the following reasons. Let's say it's a cross-racial identification, which studies have shown can be very difficult for a person of one race to accurately describe and identify someone of a different race. And that becomes your case theme. Hey, misidentification, or the way that the photos were presented to that person by the detective steered that person to identify that one person. For example, in a common six-pack, you may have one photograph, you see the background here behind me, that's in a lighter photograph background than the other 5 photos. Well, your eye is going to sort of naturally gravitate maybe to that person with the lighter background, and sometimes that's done deliberately to draw attention to that photo so the person will say, you know, I think it's that person right there. Or you may get a six-pack where people have facial hair of varying different types, and you, my client, has no facial hair or has very different facial hair than these other people, so that the human eye is trained to sort of focus on that person. So the theme of the case then becomes, hey, the identification this witness made can't be trusted. So case theme, developing it early, knowing where you want to go, the story to tell. It's about storytelling. You have to know what story you want to tell early on in the case. Thank you.